Abortion back in the headlines in Ireland in recent days. We had the pro-life march that took place in Dublin City yesterday, and last week of course we had the review into Ireland's abortion laws being published, making a number of recommendations including an abolition of the 3-day waiting period. Mick, should we liberalise or expand access to abortion services in Ireland?
Yes, I think we should. I would make a general point that access to abortion services in any society is almost invariably a good litmus test of the strength or otherwise of the civil liberties in that society. You'll find that repressive regimes tend to curb, curtail or ban abortion, and more democratic societies, particularly where the law has been shaped by popular pressure, have greater access. So we're 5 years on from repeal, and the state asked the barrister Marie O'Shea to do a review of Ireland's abortion regime to identify weaknesses and changes that might be necessary from the point of view of improving a health service for women in our society. Marie O'Shea, one of her main proposals is that the 3-day wait be abolished. So that means that a pregnant person goes to a GP, has a consultation, wants, say, an abortion pill, but has to come back 3 days later after reflection in order to have the prescription. I think that is a very patronising arrangement. I think it is particularly harsh on women in rural areas where only one in 10 GPs provide abortion services. The World Health Organization thinks that it's not a good idea. They are against it. And I think that the 3-day wait should be abolished. I know that Leo Varadkar has said that he's uncomfortable with doing that 5 years after the repeal vote, but I would be more concerned about the comfort of women in crisis pregnancies. The review was based on women's health needs, and we should base ourselves on that rather than the comfort or discomfort of this or that politician.
Regina, should we expand access to abortion?
I'm not sure, and I've now read the review by Marie O'Shea, and some of the things that I do absolutely agree with, and it doesn't require any changes of legislation. The Irish people voted in very large numbers to allow, in permitted circumstances, women to avail of abortion services, and there's lots of counties where you still can't, and so that needs to be fixed. But at the same time, I do really uphold the idea of there being conscientious objections, because, you know, the reason that it took us so long to get to the place where we are today is because people's faith obviously played an enormous influence in the decisions that they did. Now, compassion, I think, took over a number of years ago, which is a good thing. But I'm also sure that people should be allowed to object. So therefore we should have the range of services that are currently legally available in every public healthcare service, and there should be an active campaign on the Department of Health or the HSE to go and find doctors that will provide those services in counties where we currently are not, and that's a good thing. I think I disagree with Mick on the 3-day, and I've read the report a number of times since yesterday to try and find the scientific or the medical basis for reviewing the 3-day period, and I can't find any. So if it's just that it's a concern because people can't access it in a county and we fix that issue, does that mean that issue goes away? And I would say, probably Mick would say it doesn't. To my mind, the numbers of women that accessed abortion from the beginning of January 2019 to the end of December 2021 was 17,820 women. They needed them, they availed of them. But to my mind, there are probably some women, because of the 3-day wait and because of some of the information or the advice that they were given, decided to keep their baby. And I think that's necessarily a good thing for them. And I don't think we should take that, reflection time away from them. I think it's interesting that Marie O'Shea wants us to make that right to reflection kind of voluntary in the law. I don't really know what that means. We all have the right to reflect. I don't need to go to the doctor until I decide to go to the doctor. But I think the right to reflect, which is in the law, allows women to, and I don't think it's, disingenuous or, I definitely agree with Mick that if you live in Offaly and you have to travel to Galway, it might be an issue to get back there 3 days later. But, if we can reduce that 17,820 women by, keeping that reflection period, I think that maybe we should look at it. But I am open to saying that if there is scientific or medical advice, that hinders women from making the ultimate decision, well then absolutely, I just didn't see it in the report.
Well, I don't think that the issue of travelling, say, from Offaly to Galway isn't as live since COVID? Because I think the initial consultation now can be done
telephone.
over the phone.
Yeah,
they did make that change, so you can make an initial. Now you do have to ultimately travel to Galway because of the geographical problem, which you both touched on. Mick, what is the specific argument about the 3-day waiting period that you would make in favour of abolishing it?
I think it's patronising, and I think if you went out and spoke to women about the issue, the big majority of women would agree that it is patronising as well. I mean, if you go to your GP and you need access to a health service and you need a prescription, in no other circumstance are you asked to come back 3 days later before you can have that prescription. Women can make their own minds up. Pregnant people can make their own minds up after a consultation with a GP. And I think it's patronising to be asked to come back again. Just Regina raised some interesting points there about conscientious objection. So where you have a situation in a county that you have a significant number of GPs voice a conscientious objection to providing abortion services, there is an onus on the HSE to say, okay, this is an important service as part of the Irish Health Service, and we will do whatever is necessary to find a sufficient number of GPs in the area to provide the service. You should not have people with crisis pregnancies being forced to travel long distances in that regard. And also, it's one thing when we talk about a conscientious objection from a GP. It's a different thing entirely when we talk about a conscientious objection from an institution. And I would question as to whether how many of the 8 maternity hospitals that 5 years on, 5 years after repeal, are yet to introduce abortion services within their hospital are actually making a conscientious objection. In other words, hospitals where there is religious influence or religious control, and there should be no toleration of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Every maternity hospital in the state should provide the service that the people have agreed on.
Yeah, I know we had Stephen Donnelly, the Minister for Health, on the show, and when asked that very issue, he said he hoped by the end of the year that would no longer be the case. Now, we'll have to wait and see whether that pans out. Regina, is it patronising? Like, as you say, women will have reflected, surely,
by the
time they make the call.
And look, come here, anybody that's ever been involved in a crisis pregnancy knows that you don't think about anything else all day, every day, right? But what I'm saying is that there's a fine balance here. First of all, there are people who do in this country have religious faith that guides their views, that guides their moral standards. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights allows for religious beliefs and cultural elements, where you're interpreting the rights that have been enshrined in law. All I'm saying is that we're talking about ending, a life here. 3 days is not an awful lot of time to allow anybody to reflect further than they've already reflected once they go to the doctor. I really don't. I struggle.
But is the implication not that they haven't reflected?
Well, come here. As I've said to you, I know every woman has already reflected. But what I'm saying is that if there isn't any medical or scientific reason that it's causing women not to be able to access the services, it's 3 days, when we're talking about the difference between a life or a death, I don't think it's something, that's actually hindering people. When you look at the numbers of the 17,820 women in those 2 years that accessed abortions, it wasn't that difficult for them to get the access to the healthcare that they are legally entitled to, that was fought and won for, by people in this country 5 years ago. There's a couple of other things in the review that I can't get my head around. We're proposing, or the barrister is proposing, that the current practice of 2 practitioners where a woman's life is at risk or serious harm to her health, she wants to do away with that so that we don't, confer with another doctor. She just wants them to be able to refer to the notes. I don't understand that, and I think I would need far more information to do that. The bit about safe access zones, and I certainly agree that no woman should ever be intimidated going into a hospital or into a doctor or into any organisation that provides advice. But I reflect on the language in that recommendation is that anybody that influences a woman's decision against obtaining an abortion has to suffer an illegal impediment. So I'm sitting down with my cousin, my best friend, talking about the pros and the cons, and I suddenly convince them that they shouldn't go ahead. Then I become critical of illegal. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that whatsoever. I really don't. And also there's a bit in the review that says that anybody that's offering misinformation to women seeking abortion, it should be illegal. Most women are going to recognised, authorised and state funded either doctors or institutions. I wonder who she's referring to with regard to the, providing the misinformation and for it to be an illegal offence. And when I look at the recommendation in the whole, there isn't a single word of caution. There isn't a single element of that. When we actually debated for this, and I was one of the people that did TVs and radio shows to try and help people come to the decision that we ultimately came to. One of the things that we consistently spoke about was that abortion is a rare occurrence. And 17,820 abortions in the space of 2 years or 3 years isn't what I would consider rare. So I think it would have been helpful if the review had looked at how we could actually help those women make different decisions if that's what they wanted. Because the only thing that's left for a woman to reflect and maybe to be absorb the information that her doctor might give her is currently the 3 days. So I'm not against making sure that what we have in law is available to every county, to every woman that wants it. But I absolutely recognise that we are talking about, taking and ending a life. And I think there has to be due consideration and some, thought and reflection about that, not on the part of the woman, but on the part of the state that's upholding that service.
Mick, should we have safe access zones, or does the language in the report suggest criminalising anybody who advocates a pro-life position?
There should be safe access zones. We've seen very noisy and pointed demonstrations and protests outside of GPs' clinics and outside of hospitals, where pregnant people trying to access abortion services have had to walk past or through those protests, and that is not something that's it's a very negative thing. And I think the idea of a safe access zone is a very positive proposal, just on some of the issues that have come up there. The idea of abortion in Irish society as something that is rare. I've never argued that abortion would be rare. Abortion is something which 1 in 3 women in the course of their lives will have access to. It's a right that they should have access to it, in my view, and I don't think that should be used as an argument for restrictions. On the issue of Marie O'Shea's proposals, just to focus in maybe on the question of the health of the mother. So abortion is allowed by law after 12 weeks, where the health or the life of the mother is at risk. But the number of women who've had abortions on grounds of health has not changed in the last 5 years. And I think the barrister has identified the fact that there is a chilling effect. The chilling effect relates to the fact that a doctor who prescribes an abortion or performs an abortion after 12 weeks on the grounds of health, that unless they can prove that the grounds were 100%, there is a potential imprisonment of up to 14 years. And she's recommending that abortion services, being health services, should not be criminalised, that the 14 years should be scrapped. And in that case, the doctor should be allowed to use their professional judgment in relation to whether the health of the mother or the life of the mother is at risk. And that seems to me to be a very reasonable and positive proposal.
We're just out of time, but I started with Mick, so Regina, final word.
Well, I welcome the review. We had it in the legislation that we'd come back after 3 years and we'll talk about, what needs to be tweaked. And we can see obvious things to expand and extend the services to counties that don't have it should be definitely a runner. I think we need to be really cautious about the other issues, the influencing women's decisions to make it illegal, to the misinformation being an illegal crime. I don't know who's given misinformation. I might agree with Mick on the fact that the definition of risk and serious harm might need to be addressed and maybe looked at. But again, it's the doctors that actually made these definitions for us, and nobody wants to do any harm, and obviously the Hippocratic Oath tells immediately that you don't unless you're not going to be able to save the woman's life. So maybe we need to reflect on some of the conditions, but I certainly wouldn't, and I don't mind being insulted by anybody about this, I wouldn't like to see us fast tracking this. We need to be considerate about it, constantly reflecting that what we're talking about here is the difference between life and death.